Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Adobe Creative Educator live stream series. My name is Clara Galán, and I am live streaming here from my home in San Francisco, California, as I know many of you are tuning in from home as well. So we're so excited to be here with you today. Today we have a very special guest, so Holly Clark, who's also joining from California. We're excited to have you and excited to talk about assessment. So as many of us are moving to a distance learning environment, how are we approaching assessment with students? And I'm joined here by my amazing partner in crime, Tanya. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. So excited to be back. Actually, today's guest is really special to me because here's two of my partners in crime. I have my two work partners right here. And I'm so excited to have Holly Clark on the show today. She is my co-author and an amazing educator and one of my very closest friends. She's my sister. So Holly, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit about what you're doing, what you're up to these days.
So thank you for having me, first of all. And there's not too much I'm up to. This is it. But I'm super excited to be here because some of the things that I'm really passionate about happen to really work well inside of this new environment of teaching, not with someone in the front of the class, but really a blended learning model, which is really what this is. And I don't know why we're not calling that. We're calling it online learning. And it's really a little bit more blended than anything. So talking about assessment today and getting to show some really great examples is truly an honor.
Well, before we jump into that, I want to make sure that the people who are watching live, or even if you're not watching live, that you feel comfortable to ask questions and to engage in conversation. We have a moderator that's also checking constantly all the chats that are going on. So we want you to feel free, if you're here, please take a second and introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, where you're joining from today. And if you have any questions around assessment and in a remote learning environment that you might want to ask. And so we can really use this space as a place to continue conversation live and even way after the show has ended. So I'm going to kick off our first question with you.
Well, wait, first, before people, when they're saying hello, tell where they're from. I love knowing that.
Yeah. And we get an international audience here. It's incredible to see like where people are coming from. So please take a moment and add in your where you're coming from, because oh my God, look at that already in Iraq.
I know.
Wow, welcome.
That's amazing.
Some are on Facebook, some are on Twitter, some are in our Facebook group. So feel free to just post in the comments right below.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Nice to meet all of you. Oh, this is great. Yes. So, today we're talking about, assessment, which often has this kind of like icky, connotation. And it really is a beautiful thing when you know how to do it well. Yeah, exactly. And so, I'm kind of curious, like, as you are, in this space right now, how has your work with educators changed with this transition now to distance or, remote or blended learning, as you mentioned? What changes have you seen in some of the schools that you have been working with?
So first of all, one of the first things that has happened is getting everyone to a certain level. So got to get everyone on Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams. And I think we're just getting there and people are starting to feel comfortable. And now they're looking around and being like, now what's next, which is really important. And I see a lot of people placing on Twitter and around, and even teachers asking me, how do I stop cheating online? And I'm like, oh, if you're asking that question, you might be doing it wrong, because cheating means that a kid is has a question they can Google. And so we want to think past that as we go into this other kind of assessment. And so now that we're at what I'm sort of calling phase 2, and we can look around and see other modalities and things that we can do in this blended learning environment, it's time to rethink assessment. And for me, assessment is like, I don't want to admit it because it's so boring sounding, like you said, but it is everything to me, because it's from the assessment that I design everything that comes before it. Mm-hmm. And that design process is why teaching has been my jam. And I've kind of learned that some teachers don't understand that teaching is designing. It's like being an artist. Yeah. Like you are painting a picture in your classroom of what things are going to look like. And And so for some people, they might not be super creative and they might not be something. So once you decide you're going to put on that design hat and think of learning as a designing activity that you do, now you got to go look out at certain places of where to find ideas. There's no artist, I mean, maybe Michelangelo or something, but most artists, if you're a graphic artist, what do you do first before you make a graphic? You go Google and you see what other artists are doing. And then you go, oh, that's a good idea. I can put in a hat there or whatever. And educators need to do the same thing. They need to like start Googling some stuff. And here's what I'm going to ask you not to do, though. Don't Google and find something on Teachers Pay Teachers, because that is something that is not going to be designed for your class, and you're a designer. So you can get some ideas off Teachers Pay Teachers, like if you want, don't buy it. But I mean, some are good. Jennifer Gonzalez is on there with Multipedagogy. She's great. But most, it's where you get your idea to start the design process. And so in this assessment, that's how we need to think about it. And that's what we're going to talk about next, I think.
I love that analogy of the artist or the designer, because you're thinking about your audience first in mind, and each group of students is different. And so how are we really customizing that to meet their learning needs?
Yeah, it's like in the Renaissance, if they came to you and said, we would like something for our house, you wouldn't just be like, oh, I don't need to see your house. I'll just make you something.
Yeah, exactly. And here's a template. Yeah. And thinking about, with all schools now moving to a distance learning environment, how are you seeing assessment differently? Or what are some, recommendations you might give, or examples you've seen from other educators and how they're approaching assessment specifically in distance learning?
So it's really not even distance learning, to be honest with you. It's really the assessment period. And I wrote a post for Adobe, which I think will be up tomorrow, around kind of my gripes with multiple choice questions. Or sometimes they're okay. But I want people to start thinking beyond the multiple choice question, because I can't get really rich information about student learning and growth from a student choosing from 4 answer choices. I want to understand why they chose that choice. I want them to apply it in real world situations. So some of the things that I'm asking teachers to do to rethink assessment is to ask themselves, like, how do we know a kid knows that? Just because they chose from 4 answer choices? So maybe you use something like Adobe and you have kids create something, and then let's say they create something in Adobe Post that kind of shows their understanding. We'll talk more about this later. But then they can put it into any program, Flipgrid, Adobe Video, Seesaw, and explain the reasoning behind it. And when that's called like articulation of learning. And brain research tells us that if a student has a cognitive struggle during this process, they have a better chance of taking the information with them. And so we want to give them that cognitive struggle by asking them to tell us everything they know. And they're like, oh, I don't know. I got to think about it. And they write stuff down and they get, really nervous, and they redo it 17 times. That's a win for me, right?
Yeah.
And nobody has done, oh, can I redo my multiple choice question 17 times? Please, Miss Clark? They might redo it if they got it wrong.
Yeah.
Not just instinctively.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think for so many, and I'm looking at the comments right now, and I know Toby is on here, and he said, the assessment I'm seeing is, let's get through this term, right? And right now, it's definitely a challenge for so many, both teachers and students. And, we had Felisa and Natasha here on our show a few weeks ago, and we spoke about equity and how it's not necessarily like one size fits all in every, home. Like, so like we're in a really challenging time right now. And so, Holly, like, what do you think is like a way to kind of deal with some of those challenges that we're sort of seeing? I know that you probably have some comments
down there. And that question is, here's a challenge. Cultures are rooted in testing as evidence of proper teaching. And how do we encourage teachers? Well, here's what I want to say. We have those tests off of our shoulders now. And while some teachers have only learned how to assess in that way, they have this freedom. And I truly believe there's no way that next year kids are going to take tests again. So we're going to have 2 years to play with this idea. And for me, I only did assessments that got at student thinking, project-based, asking them to talk about their learning. And I know for 1 year, I was teaching 175 kids, and they had to take an assessment for the state because it was 7th grade, and 173 of them got 100% on the state exam. And that was 54 IEPs and 504s.
Wow.
And so like I took the risk, and it's a growth mindset to say, you know what? I let them learn how to take multiple choice questions because they were going to have to take those with the state exam, and we had time for that. But where I was getting information about them was not from that multiple choice exam. That was like homework or something that they could practice. And when I stopped doing it in that way, and I watched and I was able to really examine the results, I couldn't go back. I couldn't do it morally because I was learning more about my students.
So, I mean, now these teachers are home, right? And our kids are home. And now is this really interesting period where it's challenging in one way, because I think there's so many teachers that are uncomfortable with this digital space. And I understand, like, this is for some, like, really out of their comfort zone. And for some, they're a little bit more comfortable with it. So what would you say to those teachers that might feel a bit uncomfortable in this space? Like, what might be some of the, like, a piece of advice that you would say to, like, encourage them to kind of join in and this way of thinking about this risk taking?
Okay, so I have 2 answers to that. First is, I want you to remember this phrase: press forward. When students are doing something and you're trying to assess them, get an app like Flipgrid or Adobe Spark Video or Seesaw where they can press record and tell you what they know. And let that be the first place you start. And I'm going to show you an example right now, if it's okay. So if you, Clara, you'll share my screen.
Sure.
And I'm just going to stick on this one. This is called a story bento, and it's from an idea of a book bento, and I took it into a short story. And what it is it's taking this organizational structure of a Japanese bento box, and we're going to use that for students to explain their thinking and understanding around a book. So let's pretend you're reading The Outsiders, and you want kids to explain everything that they learned, but you don't want a big paper, or you don't want to give a multiple choice exam. So what this can look like, and let me head over here, is it can look like this example where the kid has an outsiders there, and they have 5 things that represent the book to them. And this is great. When I saw this, I'm like, I am in. This is fantastic. Now, I taught The Outsiders for 20, and 4 periods a day. So a lot of times. And when I look at this, it doesn't make any sense to me. I get the Cherry because Cherry's a major character, but the other stuff, I have no idea what they're talking about. And if I would use that phrase, press record, and I would take this image and take it into Adobe Spark, Seesaw, Flipgrid, whatever, and have kids explain. I want it written too, to be honest with you, because that's an English class. But being able to do both written and articulate it is important, because we're talking about life skills here too that we can get at with assessment. If a kid can articulate something, they're going to be good with their words. And if they're good with their words, when they go to get a job, they're going to have a better chance of getting that job. And here's what we do in school. In your daily life, you spend about 80% talking and about 20% writing if you're lucky. When we go to school, we switch that. You spend 80% writing and 20% talking. And if you talk, sometimes you get in trouble. And so we manipulated it the wrong way. And so with every assessment that you do, if you have not heard from every kid in your class in 2020, you might be doing it wrong. And I just want to give an example. I was in Yellowknife not long ago, and I saw this amazing class example, and we were deconstructing it afterwards because I co-teach with some teachers there. And the woman was like proud, and I was proud too. But I said, so like, how do you think the lesson went? She's like, it went really good, right? And I'm like, yeah, but what would the students say? How did it go? What would they say about it? And she's like, I think this is what, and I said, you think? We didn't hear from every kid, and we could have in under 2 minutes with something like Flipgrid or something like Seesaw. And you think it went well, and you think that kid over there knows something, but do you know they know it?
Yeah. Yeah. And that lends itself right now very well. I mean, you can use things like Flipgrid. You can use things to, to curate your, into Seesaw. The kids could even take a picture of something that they're writing, right? And like pull that in. So like even in a remote classroom or a blended classroom, like now is the time you need to be doing that even more. So talk a little bit more about this, because this was such a cool project.
So I want to say, in this particular example that I just put up, I had them take it into Seesaw, and then I was like, wait a minute, I think this would be better in Adobe Video, which I'm not saying this because it's Adobe or whatever, but they brought it into Seesaw and they did it as that image. And yeah, I decided, what if we did the 5 things going through? And so, like, I call it the third period phenomenon. By third period, I've changed the lesson. I've made the tweaks. It's beautiful. Third and fourth period get the best lesson ever. And then fifth and sixth, I'm like, I'm done. Yeah. I gotta go. But my third period phenomenon, I had them put it in Adobe Spark Video, and then each image they explained why this had something to do with we were reading An Appointment with Love, and it was such a good way to hear from them. And then they had to pick the right theme music, which is so important, and I don't think teachers pay enough attention to this. And they had to pick the right graphic. And with Adobe, they have all these images that you can pick from Pixabay and that Unsplash. And so my kids didn't have to spend, which is normal, 5 years picking the right image. Like, you get past that.
Yeah. Yeah. And this really definitely lends itself to the idea of like a more multi-dimensional approach of assessments. And I know you've mentioned like, Seesaw and Spark Video. Like, are there any things that like any structures, any like ways that you kind of facilitate that idea of a multi-dimensional assessment?
Well, let's step back and talk about what a multi-dimensional assessment is. And if you're really interested in learning more about this, someone who does a great job of explaining it is Joe Buller. And if Joe Buller walked by here right now, I'd probably like freak out. And poor woman when she finally meets me. But she is a Stanford doctor who looks at cognitive learning science, and she has a book called and I don't know why I'm forgetting everything today, but Limitless Mind. And she talks about this multidimensional approach, and she's been talking about it in other books. But multidimensional approach means that students aren't just looking, like on a multiple choice question, for one right answer. They're looking for connections, and they're looking for patterns, and they're looking for the empathy part of it, and they're looking at it from different dimensions, which is happening here in this bento box approach, because we're not just looking at the book from like one character's point of view. We're looking at it from what are the patterns? How does rope have something to do with whatever that book is? I don't even know the book right there, but and so a kid is trying to make the patterns and connections, and then we're adding the dimension of media on top of it so that we can hear those things, those connections and patterns. And I have to say, like, and I may have already said this, when I saw this example and this book bento, I loved it, but my heart fell because I know so many teachers did this and didn't press record. I'm gonna buy a t-shirt or make a t-shirt, whatever, that says press record, and I'm gonna wear it everywhere.
That's a good idea.
I love that. I love that phrase. We have to share that out with everything. And I think, especially with moving to online environments and not actually being there physically with students, it's so important to be able to hear from every single student and kind of understand where they're at in terms of the lesson. And I love that idea of Flipgrid and other tools. And then, just diving a little bit deeper into this multidimensional approach to assessment. I know you mentioned Adobe Spark and being able to push record. When it comes to video in particular, are there any other specific ideas that educators can implement with a multidimensional approach to assessment?
Well, of course, making the connections and patterns around reflection. And I am a big proponent that we do not, at least in the American education system, it's not true of our friends from other countries, but we don't have time because we're rushing through content to stop and talk about the reflection process. And Dewey says we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience, and we're not giving in America our kids the opportunity to do that. They do a better job of that in Canada, and they also have better scores. And most people don't realize this, but Canada kicks our rear end in international achievement tests. And then people will say to me, oh, but they're homogeneous up there. And I'm like, have you been to Canada? They're not homogeneous. Certainly some communities, but some communities here are as well. And so it's that reflection process that we're not doing. And I say this, if you're not adding reflection into your design of learning, it's like cooking without the salt. Tastes okay, it's okay, but when you add the salt, the flavors, the experience comes to life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm as someone who's attempted reflection, I mean, it definitely requires, like you say, like in our book, I know you've written about, like, it's like training a puppy, right?
Yeah.
Now is like such an awesome time to actually practice that. Do you have any suggestions, like how you might? Yeah.
Well, they're all no, I'm kidding. Yes, and honestly, we do have a lot of ideas in the book. We have a whole chapter on reflection for both the Google Infused Classroom and the Microsoft Infused Classroom. But one of the things that is good is Adobe is to take in some of those pieces into Adobe Video and then have kids narrate on top of it what they learned, what the experience was they went through. But more importantly, what does this teach them about who they are as learners? Because that's an ISTE standard, understanding yourself as a learner. And so, like, distance learning gives us this rich environment to do these things. And if your grade's not going down, just tell me about yourself as a learner. And learn yourself as a learner. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so simple to use too. And not again, like, not because I work here, but like, it really is like a really simple.
There.
Yeah, I do. But I as a teacher, I was using it for years.
Right.
And, before I worked here, and I was using it with kids that were like in kindergarten and up. And I think it's a really great way for kids to be able to kind of like gather information, but also like chunk it and like think about it in chunks, because you're not thinking about the whole piece. You're building it slide by slide and adding your voice. And I think that's really powerful.
Oh, that's great, Tanya. Yeah.
And I know we have the video component too, but when it comes to visual design or graphics, are there additional ideas that teachers could potentially use within Spark Post or any other tools that are kind of similar beyond the video, more on that graphic side?
So if I will address that in 1 second. Before we leave the video portion, I want to say tomorrow's post that's going to come out on the Adobe Spark blog looks at this fourth grader who, if you look at her writing, you can't tell really what she's trying to say. And she thinks of herself as not a good writer. And then Lisa Highfill, who wrote the HyperDoc Handbook, was working with her and asked her to put what she was trying to get across in Adobe Spark video. And when she did, it makes complete sense. And then she was like, oh my God, I am a good writer. And it's such an amazing experience between the two. So I just want to send people over there tomorrow to look at that, because it's really great. Now, when we look at videos and Adobe Spark Post, I love, and Tanya and I both love this idea of kids taking their learning, critically thinking their way through it. So they have to come up with 6 words to summarize what they've learned, putting that into a post and designing it with images. And there's an example of it on the post tomorrow with Shakespeare. And then taking that post that they created and doing what?
A video.
Next level.
Yeah. Well, And the 6-word summary is a really great example of consolidating like big ideas. And we talk a lot about that. Like, and it's so simple to do, you know, it's such a great either check for understanding or as like a summative understanding, like to be able to consolidate and synthesize a big idea and pull that piece together and make sense of something in 6 words with an image as a paired text is really, really a powerful strategy for kids to evaluate and really check to see if they was strong understanding. So that's one great way that like very often we don't think like, oh, we think post and we make pretty graphics, but like using it as an assessment check is a really powerful way of doing that.
And also, so someone wrote something about kind of like emergency remote learning. It makes me think of this, Tanya. It makes me think that if I were with my students right now, and right now I'm just coaching teachers to be able to help it, and I don't interact with students, I'm just watching them through the eyes of these other teachers. I couldn't teach right now without that weekly reflection. I would want to know what they've done that week, what they learned about themselves as learners, and having that at the end of the week is going to make a student more think about like, oh, I better get that done because I'm going to have to reflect on it on Friday. And
yeah.
That's
I've been running these internal classes at Adobe for Adobe Kids, and Clara is smiling. Yeah, so we just had a class and they were so cute. They had a concert at the end. They did a concert. They performed.
They're so talented. It's incredible.
It was insane. Like they're the cutest kids. This is something we've been putting on for like 5 weeks. And so they put anyway, but the activity that I had them do just now was, and this was from, I actually got the idea from my friend Shari Disler, who teaches high school. And she was talking about corn folios, like corn journal. Like, yeah, isn't that a great idea? And she
primary resource. Yeah.
And I was like, that's a great idea because like right now all the kids are home and they like, well, it's like Spark Page really lends itself to this idea of like pulling together like a journal and like adding images. And it could be like, it could give historical context. Like these things are happening in the news today, like pulling in an image from that, pulling in a video, like kind of like pulling in day to day and just kind of adding to it and like creating this kind of reflection of like what is kind of happening in your space right now. And I was like, and so that was the activity I had the kids do, was like, let's start a corn journal or a corn folio as Shari called it. And then I think that's a great way of also tying in reflection, right? And scaffolding a bit of like reflective questioning and having the kids kind of pull things together.
Tanya, can you imagine if there's a history teacher out there right now who's not doing that for this world event that is unlike anything we've ever seen? It's all malpractice. If you're a history teacher and you are not having kids document what's happening on an Adobe page in your community.
Yeah. Now's the best time to be doing that, 100%. And to pull in those like headlines and clips that you're finding off the news. Like this is such a great time. It's actually such a great activity. This is a great activity.
Yeah.
Doing that.
Incredible. Picture at the store, you're like, someday these are going to be really important.
Exactly.
Actually, that's what I did. I went with my camera at the grocery store because it's so surreal to go out, right? It's like you feel like I almost feel like an alien when I'm walking around. I'm like, this is like not the world. I feel like I'm in like those movies, like those aliens are coming movies. Like it's so. And so I took my camera and I shared them to Holly, and I was like sending them. I was like, "This is going to be history one day." And I like
you start taking them. Like my work is closed, and I'm like, I better take a picture of this because, well. But can you imagine? And I'm kind of just thinking this right now that there are teachers who are not having kids document this in some way and use it for writing. So I saw Trevor McKenzie on Inquiry by the Fire, and they said that the universe has handed us an inquiry unit.
Yeah.
How are we not using this for math, statistics, science, around the science of like, what is a theory and what's not a theory? Like, I understand at first we were like, oh, I don't know. It's pretty raw and whatever. It's not raw anymore. This should be teaching. Everything should be.
They're creating their own
thing right now that you're having conversations with and assessing with a multiple choice test. You know? This is the place to like really get kids like writing and creating and adding visuals. So this is great. So Natasha, yeah, I have my students work in their journals and focus on reflection to create new concepts, especially during the COVID-19 situation. Having students work on writing, creating visuals to share with peers will benefit their growth. Yes, Natasha.
I know. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh my gosh, where's she from? Those lucky kids.
No, Natasha, I would love to hear where you're joining us from. And I see a lot of other comments in here. Also, Alicia shares that she has students bullet journal throughout the year. So this would be great to add to weekly reflections. So glad that you're going to incorporate that as well into their sketchbooks.
Yes. Or even take pictures of their sketchbooks. There was a boy in our class, second grader. Did you see that one? I don't know if you saw it, Clara. This boy in our class is second grade, and he had taken pictures of all of his sketches. And I asked, how did you do that? He said, I took them and I sent them to my dad. Like, he's 7. It was so cute. And then he figured out how to add them into his journal. So that's a great idea. He put them all in his page. So you can blend analog and digital and create something really dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And there's so many different, because there's that kind of analog piece and bringing it into technology where it's kind of both worlds all together. We have a couple. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just really afraid that maybe the reason we're not using COVID as learning materials, and no disrespect for it, but because they're not up on Teachers Pay Teachers. And we can't go find that and then copy it or whatever. And so now it's the time to, like, you have no tests. Just try it out. Have some fun. And it's, you can get the content all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Great question from what can we do as chemistry teachers? Any examples? I'm having them do their water unit at home with Flipgrid to turn in understanding learning. That's awesome, Cynthia.
Okay.
That's the kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, we probably can't add to that as non-chemistry teachers, but having them press record, you're getting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're doing their experiments and making their thinking visible. I think that's a great start.
Yeah, and I think if there's chemistry teachers or science teachers watching this recording or watching live, please feel free to add your ideas. And that's the whole point of this, to get conversation going, share best practices. I have another similar question from Sunny. Hey, Sunny, thanks for joining. What about little ones like grades 1 and 2? Would journaling this cause more anxiety or fear? So that's a great point. Holly, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
She has some thoughts.
Well, who's better on something like Flipgrid or Spark Video than a first or second grader? First of all, you're never going to capture that. And I just can't think of another word for this, but they're yummy little voices right now. Like, it's the greatest thing. Like, they're so cute. And where they can't write and they can't tell you everything in words quite yet, this is why you go to like a grid on Flipgrid and have them articulating their learning. And also, I wanted to say, but just in case we start to wrap up, because and I don't know how long we have here, but I'm trying to continue this conversation around assessment using goedspace.com is the web-based thing, and it also has an app. And on my website, I have a thing on how to like connect with me on there, because it's kind of private behind Twitter, and so we can have real conversations. And so if you go to infuse.link and then Edspace, you can find information on that. And then if you have questions around assessment, or you have some great ideas, or maybe you even want to write like a blog post on my blog, I'd love it. No, but let's continue that conversation.
I love that. And I'm going to definitely join in on that conversation. I want to go back to that last question, because I think that's an interesting, just something to add, right? The idea of, I have a third grader at home, my own child, and he doesn't necessarily really understand like everything that's happening. He always calls it the coronavirus. So when the coronavirus is gone, like, this is kind of how he approaches it. Because like, they're kids, like in their space, like obviously like we don't want to like be alarmist, but the reality is like he still knows.
There he is.
I know.
I'd lock the door. This is Dad, on a live stream with all these people right now. Please, okay. Yeah, and I mean, this is the reality, right, for all of us, working, and having kids at home. But he definitely is dealing with like some it's hard for him to find words about everything. And the way that he takes things and internalizes them is very interesting. And so it's not that you have to directly have that conversation about coronavirus, but having them just articulate, like, what are they doing right now? What is their home? Like, share about your house. They want to share that. Like, they want to be connected more than anything on the planet. All my son wants to do right now is play Minecraft while on Zoom with his friends, so he can play in a space with his friends. And so having the opportunity for kids, if it's possible, to like be on something like Flipgrid, where they can, if they're not doing that, like having conversation, especially like first and second graders, in a place that's safe, that has that monitoring, is really important for them, I think, right now, because we really miss each other. So like having them ask a question, like share your room, or like do a dance, or like expressing things in a way that would make them feel like they're connected, as opposed to being so disconnected, I think is where the technology and like the idea of assessments should be coming in terms of like really rethinking what their social emotional needs are right now, and pivoting from like what you would do because it was important for some tests that they have to do, which they don't right now, to like, how can you engage these kids who are feeling like really isolated and really want to be with each other?
Yeah, I completely agree, Tanya. And I think I know it could be challenging to even broach the subject, or even have students kind of talk about some of these more challenging topics, but bottling it up is not, I think, the way to do that. It's really getting them to express themselves in a healthy way, really be able to look at social emotional learning. And even right before this, we were in the class that Tanya's leading, and the kids got on and they were sharing. One played the drums, one was playing the guitar. And even after they said, we're going to take this over, we're going to connect with one another and start a virtual band. So even if they want to connect, so allowing them to share their voices, I think is the best.
Right now are desperate for social interaction, and their parents are super stressed, like including mama over here, who snapped at her poor 8-year-old son this morning, who was crying in this room on the floor. Like, I'm not perfect. All of us are doing the best we can. So I think that question really struck a chord with me, because as he's at the door, like, these are kids. Yes, they definitely are dealing with a ton of anxiety, but it's not so much attacking it through the lens of corona, but I think just providing them with that opportunity to connect in some way, which is what having students make their thinking visible, having them ask more inquiry-driven questions, having them create, is going to address those issues. Sorry, I had to say that just because like I'm living it, and it just really struck that chord for me.
I think it's the reality for so many people, and I'm seeing a lot of comments in here too, kind of echoing those sentiments. But Holly, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I feel like every time I talk to you, I learn so much. So really appreciate that. And I know there's a lot of appreciation going on here in the chat. And I know I shared that Headspace link, but is there anything else you want to leave folks with to kind of do a deeper analysis or continue the conversation?
Well, first of all, continue the conversation on Headspace. And I think we need to have more conversations around assessment, and we need to have more conversations around these tests are not going to be part of our world, most likely for 2 years. So what does that mean? And now that we all have Google Classroom and we all have Microsoft Teams, so we're on there, we're cool. What's the next step? And how to, like, I really want to talk about that. But obviously you're on an Adobe Facebook page, so you like yourself some Adobe tools, but go play with them. Go see if you can like play with them yourself. Make a dream vacation on Adobe page, and and get to know it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you again. And for those who are watching the recording or tuning in live, we'll be here again at 12:30 p.m. Pacific next Thursday. So looking forward to seeing everyone, and hope everyone is staying safe and healthy at home.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
You can also follow some of this stuff on Infuse Classroom. So if you go to facebook.com/groups, Infuse Classroom, you can go there. I have a blog, hollyclark.org. I'm on Twitter at hollyclark.edu, which is right there. But I love these conversations. And so let's continue them all over here in this Facebook group, all over. It's the best.
Making sure I have that right there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Be sure to check it out.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Talk to you next week. Thanks again.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Click the link in the description below to explore more free online professional development, and click the link on screen to subscribe to the channel for more videos.